Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn,
and me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 20th episode of the Stream of Art podcast. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to have a bit of a mental regroup, and we're just going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about the podcast. Since this is our 20th episode, we're going to, reflect a little bit on the experience, maybe talk a bit about what we want to do next, and just really have a conversation. We have a lot going on. I think we're both feeling a little bit burnt out, a little bit tired. So, we thought this would be a good chance rather than taking on another topic, just, have a little bit of a regroup session. But first, we will kick it off with just a little check-in. So, Robyn, how did things go with you this week?
I didn't do anything other than go to work and watch TV. It was definitely not a great week. But, yeah, that's all I can say, honestly. I have, no updates. Mm-hmm. I did a bit of painting because I'm still trying to do that 100-day project, which is kind of fallen off the rails a bit, but I'm still showing up some of the time. Yeah, that's it. Yay, me.
It's, well, I mean, those are, I think, really important weeks to have. I think it's really easy to get down on yourself when you do have a week like that, but we can't, as we've talked a lot about before, you can't just be go, perfect days, perfect weeks, perfect months, nonstop. You're going to have cycles and you're going to go through periods, and it could be a week, it could be even longer. I've been in a slump for what feels like the last 3 to 4 months. And those kinds of cycles just happen. And, it's good that you were giving yourself that time to just you were doing the thing you had to do. You went to work, you painted as much as you could, and then you were just watching TV and giving yourself that space, because it's so easy to just get down on yourself. But instead, if you can reframe it as just this thing that needs to happen, and it could just be, if you're tired because you've been working, I mean, you're really still just getting back into being at work. That is obviously something that is going to be taking a toll. To just give yourself that space. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, though, and I think it's just, I was messaging back and forth with a friend who I haven't talked to for a while, who's kind of in a similar-ish place as me, and there's just something so fundamentally wrong with the way we've been conditioned, where, I know on paper that, what I've done over the past week is totally fine and was needed or whatever. But the thing is that it's we cannot just do nothing. Mm-hmm. And then when we do, because as you say, there's times where you kind of have to, there's this guilt that kicks in. We should be doing more with our time or being more productive. It's this cult of productivity is really what it feels like sometimes to me. And, the friend I was chatting with made a really good point. She's like, people don't have hobbies anymore. It's anytime someone has a hobby, there's they're trying to build a side hustle out of it, which I guess you could argue that I'm guilty of that, but it's so true. And what is that? Where is that coming from? And why do we have that? And I don't think it's just because, I know financially times are really tight for a lot of people. And so it might be this is just a way to earn a little bit of extra income. But I don't think that's the main driver. It's we're all trying to prove our worth through the things we're doing. And the things we're doing aren't a legitimate depiction of our worth unless they're creating a monetary value or something. You know what I mean? I don't know what I'm saying.
You mean. Yeah, I agree with you. It's the idea that something that's worth doing is only worth doing if we get something out of it. Generally, that's going to be money.
Yeah. So I'm just I've been super low mood and just angry again, just in this really cynical place where it's just what is the world that we're living in? What is the society that we've built and I think I think across the board, like I've talked to so many people recently they've all been struggling, they've all been unhappy, and it's like, what are we doing? And why? And why do we keep perpetuating this system
Mm-hmm.
and feeding it, you know? It's really aggravating. And I know I'm just as guilty of
Mm-hmm.
feeding this system because I'm also playing this part. So that's where I'm at, where I'm just like, just questioning everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, like, I'm like an onion. Ogres have layers. Um, but, there's this going on. And then there's another layer of thought, which is this just me self-sabotaging? And then there's another layer of
Yeah.
thought, like, is this indicating that I'm on the wrong path? And then there's another layer of thought, and it's just like layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of different thoughts and I'm like,
And it's hard to sort through them.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reflects a lot of what I've felt off and on for the last few months. A lot of those really low lows where you just like, you wonder what the point is.
Yes.
Like why don't I just give up? Why don't I just call it a day? I'm just, I had a good run, but there's really no point. And something I'm finding helpful is reminding myself that I always come out of those slumps. It does seem to be for me like a cycle. Like I go through these extremes where I'm feeling great, like I can take on the world, and then it plummets in the complete opposite direction. I can't seem to find something in the middle. It's one extreme or the other.
That's me as well.
And then trying to navigate that. Yeah. And I mean, I've been experimenting with, now that I realize that is a cycle I fall into. I think for a lot of years I just wondered what was wrong with me. I know it's just a part of how I operate. Now that I know that, I've been able to start experimenting with some things just to kind of help. And again, even just being able to acknowledge that going through those periods, whether it lasts sometimes for me like just a half a day, sometimes it's 2 to 3 days, sometimes it's a week or more. Just knowing that it's something that I will come out of is helpful because it helps me to rid myself of that shame. Because I think too, we feel so much shame around not feeling super excited and happy because that's what, again, people are projecting. I think people are getting a lot better about it nowadays. There's a lot more authenticity and vulnerability, and people are showing up and saying, things aren't great right now and I'm not feeling 100% and I'm not thrilled and like going after it. So that is, we are headed in that direction, but I think we still are so programmed to feel like we have to have everything figured out all the time and that we have to be like everything 100%. Everything's figured out, everything's sorted. We know what we're doing. We know where we're going, and we feel happy all the time and positive and, and I think there's obviously something to be said for cultivating positivity and appreciation and all of that, but not geez, those pipes. I don't know if you heard that.
No.
The pipes were just, somebody was running water and the pipes were not happy, but no, I think we have to still acknowledge when we are and not shy away from those feelings that, where we get down to sometimes like the deep, dark depths. Because I think that just holds, for me anyways, I feel like that holds me there longer if I'm just feeling like, well, what's wrong with me? Why do I not feel better? I should be happier. And, when you stop and think about it for a second, it makes sense why, we feel the way we do when you look at everything going on, when you look at, our personal struggles and professional struggles, and you look at the world, you look at the systems and everything we have to deal with. Like, it makes sense. I think it's important to acknowledge, the validity of whatever you're feeling and to know that you will come out of it when it's time to, and to not feel like you have to rush it and not try to force yourself to do the things you think you should, find a way to make it work for you. And then when you do have those moments where things are really going well, then like make the most of it. Not everybody is capable of being as productive from one day to the next consistently. Some people just can't do that. And I think if you can embrace it rather than fighting it or feeling bad about it, not just like you specifically, I mean anybody listening who falls into more of that kind of cyclical space, if you can find a way to make it work for you, I think that's a much more humane way of functioning and much more sustainable, rather than, again, trying to make yourself fit inside of this box of what you think a human being should be doing at any given time.
Yeah. I think the challenge for me is that the ups and downs, the cyclical nature of it is very draining. It's very tiring.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and then I kind of wonder, like, do I hit downs because when I'm up, I'm doing too much? And I think I'm getting to a point where I'm just kind of tired of thinking so much about everything.
Yeah, I
which
know
is
what you mean.
Amazing to get to that point as someone who is a chronic overthinker. But yeah, that's where I'm at, because I know I've heard this before, like, you just, yeah, like, be gentle on yourself, and everyone goes through low periods, and like ride the high when you're on it, and all of that stuff. But it's like it doesn't help with the exhaustion that comes from just cycling all the time. And like it's not just like when it's also like I can't function as well at work. So then I spend the whole day at work, not at full capacity, and then feeling guilty about that, and then feeling stressed about that too, because it means I'm not getting done as much as I need to get done. So it's all, yeah, it's all sorts of different things that make it very difficult to manage. And makes it difficult to just like accept that, okay, yeah, I'm just in a low period, I'll just give myself time until I get out of it. Like, it's very hard to accept that when it's like, I have deadlines to meet and I have work that needs to get done this week, and I can't make myself think clearly enough to do anything. It becomes much more challenging to just be like, oh, it's okay, I'll just sit with this. Like, no,
that's
it's not
true.
an option.
That's something I definitely take for granted, because I control all of my time. Yeah, no, that's something I didn't even think of. But you're right. Yeah, when you have deadlines for work and you have other people who are expecting things to be done a certain way, yeah, that's an incredible amount of pressure, and is obviously very, very exhausting, very draining mentally, physically, all of that. So
it's the modern workplace is not set up well for for anyone who is like this, which I think is probably 99% of the human population, where your levels of like your levels of productivity changes every day, your levels of like cognitive ability fluctuates. Like, that's very human, and the modern workplace is not designed to function around that. And I think it would be interesting to look into, I've known a lot of people over the past couple of years who've gone on stress leave, which I suspect a lot of that has to do with COVID, and just like that really challenged a lot of people. But I'm also curious, because one thing I've been thinking about is the productivity tools that more and more workplaces are adopting. They're also not great at taking into consideration the human experience. And you kind of wonder, like, as we're adopting more of these technologies, is that contributing to our stress in the workplace as well? Like, I don't know, just kind of it's just been something that's been in the back of my mind. It's just like, I feel like increasingly we're treated more and more like machines. And that alienates a lot of the workforce because a lot of the workforce don't have brains that are like machines.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Especially, I think, for a lot of the people who are feeling a lot of fear around losing their jobs to AI.
Yeah.
There is probably going to be that pressure to produce to a certain level that, like you said, is just, we don't have robot brains. You know, we aren't
Yeah.
computers.
What I find distressing is because I don't feel like AI is threatening my job, but I still feel this pressure to be more productive because like I don't know, there's this weird like I'm realizing that I think in some ways I'm realizing that it's very possible that over the next few years companies will be looking to fill the gaps with AI because it is just inherently more efficient than human brains. So I am feeling this kind of pressure to, yes, be more productive, fill every minute of the day with things. And this is one thing that's kind of interesting, again, with productivity tools. Like the idea is that like these tools are here to help you get through things quicker so you can be more efficient with your time. Like, okay. So then if that's the case, then if these tools help me clear 2 hours out of my day, is that 2 hours that I get to reclaim? Or is that 2 hours that I now have to fill with other stuff? In which case, so what it's essentially doing is making my brain work harder. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like you're just, it's just the expectation is just to pack more and more and more and more and more into your workday. Be as efficient as humanly possible and pack in as much as you possibly can within the 7.5 hours that we pay you. I'm like, that's not going to be good for us.
No, and this is something, once again, the main man, Cal Newport, talks about constantly, is just the issues with modern work and how unrealistic the expectations are with regards to what is expected us to be able to produce. And I mean, like knowledge workers. So anybody who uses their brain to produce anything, it just does not reflect what our brains are actually able to do. And so that's where this constant busyness comes from, that sense of I have to just always be doing something. It's that pseudo productivity that he talks about, where we're using that as a way of gauging how, you know, effective we are and productive we are is like how busy are we.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's that pressure to, like you said, like fill every single minute of that 7.5 hours that you're being paid for. And it's just, it does not reflect how the human brain actually functions.
Yeah.
Not if you're wanting to produce quality work. That's the thing is, you know, when you're trying to pack more into your day, I know this just from the years I tried to cram way too much into my practice routine, into my practice schedule. I didn't do those things as well. When I started doing fewer things and putting more focus and time into those things, my playing, my musicianship, all of it skyrocketed because I was giving everything the attention it deserved. So it was coming from a place of fear, feeling like I'm so behind. I have to do as much as possible. It's always about doing more.
Yeah.
But in that case, more was way less. Like the results were not nearly as impressive as what I got out of doing fewer things, being more intentional, being more realistic with what I actually was able to do. And that's still serving me really well. That's still how I'm structuring my practicing nowadays. Because for me, that's a big part of my work is I have to constantly be pushing myself and learning and all of that. But it's about, again, thinking on that longer time scale. But obviously, again, I am very fortunate because I am in control of my time. But yeah, for somebody who's working at a place where you don't have that autonomy.
Well, it's like you know, I'm lucky. Like I have a lot of control over my own schedule, but it's still there's external expectations.
Of course,
there's
yeah.
other people who are looking to you, and yeah, that's where the stress can kind of kick in, particularly when you're having an off week and there's not really I haven't worked in a workplace yet, anyways, that ever acknowledges that people have off weeks, which is really too bad because it means that you have people who are like me who want to do a good job and have an off week and spend that entire week just feeling really, really bad about themselves, that they haven't been on top of their game. And it's like, it's too bad that workplaces don't do a better job of addressing that.
Yeah.
I'd like to find a workplace that because again, like I've had lots of different jobs. I've yet to find a place that like treats me as a human.
Yeah.
Like acknowledges that I'm a human being, that we're all human beings, but the system is not set up that way. And that's what I think I'm just tired of, like, there's lots of benefits of like living in the modern world, of course, but I think there's just so much wrong that isn't being addressed, and I'm just kind of tired of having to suffer in that. I also want to acknowledge that I am privileged in many, many ways, and my struggles are not nearly as intense as other people's, but it's, yeah, I still like that, dealing with that kind of frustration of just like, oh, it's annoying that the things are the way they are.
Yeah, I agree.
So that was my week. How was your week?
My week was better because I wasn't sick this week. I'm 100% back to my usual self, so I was able to get back into my practicing and into my songwriting and into my exercise program and all of that. So yeah, I feel a lot better. I'm still going to be playing catch up on some of the stuff I fell behind on, but it was nice to get back into my usual thing and to feel like me again. So
Yeah.
And I have been thinking about what I wanted to post. So last week I talked about I was going to do my one courageous thing of posting something on YouTube, and I've decided what I'm going to post. It's not up yet today. We're recording today on, this is Saturday, April 20th. So as of right now, it's not up. I have a little bit of writing I want to do for it, but I'm going to say what I'm going to post. Again, not a huge deal. I decided that what I want to do is post the demos from RPM, from this year's RPM, up onto YouTube with the cover art for each one. So I'm going to make like a video with the audio, the cover art, and then I'm going to have like a description of the song. So something super simple just to get me putting something out there. But what I want this to do is lead to me doing the breakdown I talked about a couple months back, how I wanted to do like a walkthrough, going through each song, like where the idea started and sort of take it to wherever it is now. And part of that is just for my own interest, just because I often forget how things came about, especially during a month like RPM, or during February when RPM happens, where I'm in it every day. I don't have a lot of time for reflection. So it's nice to be able to go back and just remind myself like where things started and see how far they come. It's also just a nice reminder to me of you know, how far I've come with my songwriting, that I can consistently produce something, you know, using these sort of different systems and processes I have for songwriting. So it's it's something I'm just interested in doing, and again, just having up there, it's something I want to experiment is what kind of like the kind of content I want to put up on my channel. So that's going to be the first step, is just getting the songs up there, and then I want to do a breakdown for each song, which will take a little bit longer, but that'll be sort of like, that's sort of my focus for the next while as far as YouTube goes. And then from there, I'm going to do the little video essays that I want to do, where I talk about some of the stuff that I write about in my blog, some of the stuff we talk about here, like it'll be that kind of thing. So that'll go up before this episode airs on Tuesday, whatever day that is, the 23rd, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, Tuesday the 23rd. It'll be up there at that point. It'll probably just be, I think I'm just going to do like one at a time, just so that I'm not like doing a big drop. It'll give me some stuff so that I have like, you know, for the next few weeks, kind of spread it out a little bit. But
for sure. Yeah, so you're kind of that makes sense. And then you're batch creating, but you're not really batch creating, but it gives you content. Yeah,
and I think I'll probably do something on Instagram that kind of goes along with that. Although I might wait to do that for when I have the breakdown, but I don't know. Anyways, that's sort of what I'm starting with. And also I like the idea that it'll provide another place for people to hear those songs if they want to. Again, they're still just rough, but I'm at a point where I'm fine sharing stuff that's not completely finished, because I know
Yeah.
eventually I'll get it to a point where it's, you know, properly recorded and produced and all of that. But I just want to share the process and, you know, share my journey a little bit more, because I spent so many years not doing any of that, keeping everything to myself. I'm trying to just be more open, more out there, more transparent about, you know, where I'm at with all of this stuff. So I like the idea of just having that up there. And I might eventually also go back and do like my other RPM albums. Just do the same thing, just so I have like somewhere else people can hear it. Because
Yeah.
right now I just have it on SoundCloud, which is not a hugely popular place to listen to music. That I mean, maybe I think it is, but maybe just not for the kind of stuff I'm doing. I think it's actually quite popular for some genres and some artists. But anyways.
I don't use SoundCloud unless I'm listening to your stuff. Is there an app for that? Because one thing I noticed was when I follow the link, the problem with it is as soon as my phone screen turns off, it'll stop playing.
Yeah.
So I have to. So I probably have to download the app. That's probably part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And eventually, once, like for some of my older RPM albums, I do like, I want to have them properly mixed and all that. And they will eventually make it to Spotify, if Spotify is still around, you know, by the time I get that done. Whatever the streaming platform of the day is, it'll end up there. But right now, like, because they're still just like very much demos, I'm just gonna leave them where they are. But YouTube, I'm okay having like some rough stuff up there. So this is episode 20.
How many months is that? When did we start? We started December?
December, yeah. I think we did our first recording December 10th. And then we recorded a few before we actually posted at the end of December. So just before the New Year's when we actually launched. But we've been doing this. And really, we've been doing this since end of September. Like, as far as having conversations almost every week where we were sort of planning. Well, we ended up doing, you know, a couple hours of just talking, and then like the last 10 minutes, like, oh yeah, I should talk about the podcast.
Oh yes, that's right.
Which I think at the time we took as a good sign that we'd be able to make something out of this, like to be able to make an episode every week just by just having a conversation. But yeah, it's interesting because, like, I think we've talked about before, it felt like such a big thing, like such a big step at the time. But now it's just something it's just a thing that we do every week. And there's something really nice about that. And I had this experience back when I was doing my blog. I've to anybody here listening who reads my blog, I know I fell off again. I was like, the blog's back. I did one post and I have not gone back. I will get back into it. I'm very overwhelmed right now. So it's being put aside temporarily while I kind of get things figured out. But I digress. So when I got to a point where I was first starting to post my blog, it felt like a very big thing. Like, oh, I'm like putting out stuff into the world. Like, it feels like a big step, especially, you know, I am somebody who has a lot of self-doubt and I have difficulty finishing things too. So the fact that I was finishing these blog posts and putting them out, that felt like a big deal. But eventually I got to a point where it was just a thing I did every week. It was something I worked on through the week, and then I posted every Monday. And, you know, and that for me is what this podcast has become. It's something that we just do and we get it done, and then it goes out, and then we just do it again the next week. And there's something really nice about being able to demonstrate that we can do that, because I think for me, it's given me a lot more confidence in terms of moving ahead with doing stuff on YouTube, doing more of that kind of thing, because I think for so many years it felt like such a huge jump. It doesn't feel like such a big jump anymore, because I feel like I already do the thing of creating what is essentially what is content, and this long form content, but it's still content nonetheless. And, you know, sharing my ideas and just putting it out into the world, and, you know, doing that every week, doing that consistently. I feel like for me, it's given me a lot to leverage in terms of moving ahead with the stuff I want to do.
Yeah, and an opportunity for me, it's kind of an opportunity to practice sharing my thoughts, because that's one thing that I've always really struggled with. And, you know, like, I'll read stuff on how to prepare for like art shows and stuff, and artists talk about how it's like, yeah, engage the person in a conversation about like your art and what it means to you and all of that stuff. And it's funny because I always had such a block around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just I wasn't used to engaging in conversations about creativity. Like that was something that was really missing from my life. So that's been nice because we've been able to engage in those conversations together. Although admittedly a lot of our conversation it goes towards more personal development type topics.
Mm-hmm.
Versus that's one thing that I've realized is like I think if we were to kind of measure how much time we spend talking about like art and creativity versus like personal growth, personal development, I feel like we're skewing more towards like a personal development podcast versus an art podcast, which is kind of interesting because it sort of demonstrates how the two can intermingle, you know? Like
100%. Yeah. I'm more and more coming to believe that you cannot separate art from personal growth. I think you have to address both of them if you want a truly meaningful relationship with creativity. I think you can't help but do that.
Or you just can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Like I think.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, and I would be curious to talk to people who are new, like people who are kind of getting into art as a hobby and what their experience is with it in terms of personal growth. Like have they felt a growth as they've engaged with this hobby? Have they felt changes in themselves, you know? Because for me, like I started painting so young that I don't really remember. And it was like, I think at the time I started, it was kind of like a way of getting my emotions out. But if, you know, I'm curious, like for people who start as an adult, what's happening there? I'd be. Yeah.
And yeah, something actually, I've been thinking about something kind of similar because I've been feeling too like this pull to want to find people who I can ask questions, because I feel like as a teacher, I want to make sure I'm solving the right problems. I got back into reading this book. I had started reading a book called Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish. I've mentioned it before. And it's like one of those books that I was reading and then RPM hit and then I had to put it aside and I'm just getting back into it. But I was just reading this past week, you know, about making sure that you're defining the problem correctly before you go. Because we're sort of trained to look for solutions. We're like problem solvers, right? And I think you and I've maybe talked about problem solving before. It's fun to like think of ideas and think of solutions, but he cautions against solving the wrong problems, like making sure you have the right problems that you're trying to find solutions for. And it just made me wonder, you know, what am I missing for what are you laughing about? You see,
can we make this mandatory reading for every politician that exists in the world?
Oh, I wish. It's a
solutions
great book.
Yeah, like define the problem first. That would be really great. And would probably prevent these like band-aid solutions that we have that addresses everything but the root of the freaking problem.
Yeah. I think this book should be mandatory reading. It's really excellent.
I totally threw you off topic.
I found my thought again. So it just got me thinking about, you know, wanting to make sure that because I want to help people, I want to make sure I'm helping actually fix the problems they're having.
Yeah.
Like not conjuring up solutions to problems they're not having. Like, again, a lot of the stuff that I write about and that I think about and that a lot of the conclusions I've come to when it comes to teaching and music and learning and all of that comes from my own experience. And a lot of it does come from the experience of students, but I feel like I would really be able to help more people if I could find the right problems that everybody's having. And because I think about this a lot, you know, and this is something anybody who's taught anything, you know, whether you teach music or for people who have like taught art or anything like that, where you have people who come in wanting to learn and they have a lot of enthusiasm, but then something happens. And I get this when, you know, there's like a certain percentage of students I have who come in who then drop off, you know, after a couple of months. Some students will stick for years and some don't make it more than a couple of months in some cases. And I'm always curious, like, what is it? It's a lot of the same things. It's like, I'm just not feeling motivated. I just don't have the time. And it's, and so I feel like there's so much more to teaching music or teaching an art or a craft or whatever than just teaching that thing. I think we have to go deeper to figure out why is somebody pursuing this in the first place, and why is it that they abandon it so quickly? Because sometimes it is just a case of, this didn't interest me as much as I thought it would. Completely fair. I think that's healthy to go and try new things. And, when something doesn't resonate, then you find something else. Like, I think life is too short to waste time doing something you're not interested in. But for the people who, come and tell me that they feel so called to do music, and then they just don't keep going, I'm always just wondering, like, I feel like there's probably another block there. And I feel like that's where the personal development stuff really comes into play. And something like the artist way, where you're trying to unblock your artist. So I think that kind of thing can't be ignored, because there are a lot of people who would thrive within any kind of an art form if they had the other stuff to help. Because a lot of the times it's things like time management, where people are saying, I can't find the time. And it's like, they just don't know how to make the time, because nobody is taught that. Or the people who are finding like they aren't feeling motivated, probably because they don't understand that mood follows action. If you're waiting until you're motivated to do something, you're not going to do it, or it'll happen so infrequently that you don't see the progress that you want to see, and I think in order for you to have the best engagement you can with something, there has to be a certain degree of proficiency. Otherwise, it's very frustrating. We've talked about that before in developing like your technique as an artist or musician, is that it's important to do that so that you can fully express yourself, but if you aren't engaging with it consistently enough, or if you aren't committed to keep coming back to it, you're just not going to improve, and it's not going to be fun, but you're missing out on something that could be really incredible. So this is something I've been thinking a lot about, and I would love for us to find a way to reach out to people to find out things like that. Like, I love that, like the interplay between learning an art form and self-development and personal growth and all of that, and how they influence each other. And then, finding what is blocking people from doing the things they want to do creatively.
And I think one of the big blocks is that people have a complete misconception about what it is to be creative or to be an artist. And I think one of the misconceptions is that all you need to do is declare it and then it will happen. Like this kind of like, and I shouldn't say misconception, and I'm speaking from experience, where it's like, I've always been really interested in playing the guitar, but there's such the gap between the desire to play and the ability to play is so big and so tedious, involves so much tedious work that I've never really closed it. I've never closed that gap, and so and I think the same can apply, like people who want to paint, but the amount of ugly paintings you have to create before you get to that point of being able to create stuff that is rewarding, it's such a long length of time. It can be discouraging. So it's putting those, that's where I think it becomes really helpful to have, like in that early stage, learning the thing in some sort of group setting, because then it's not so much. I mean, there are some people who are totally okay with kind of going through the tedium of learning. I'm not one of those people. I would learn the guitar. I would be more inclined to stick with it if I was learning in a group, because then it's not, I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going for the social element. That's the draw. And so I'm kind of tricked into doing the tedious learning through this other draw to the activity, right? So I think like leveraging, not leveraging, that's the wrong word, but there's so much at play. And then there's the whole kind of, we sort of perpetuate this idea of, not so much now, but I think historically, like that kind of artistic genius, or that you need to be inspired to create, or like there's all these kinds of weird messaging and ideas and stories around what it is to be an artist that just isn't accurate. But we consume these stories, and I think in some cases it can prevent people from even entering the space. I don't know if that makes sense or if that resonates.
100%.
But,
yeah. I think a lot of people talk themselves out of doing the things that they want to do because they're like, oh, I'm not musical. Oh, I'm not artistic. Because they have that exact image you were just describing where somebody either has it or they don't. And we talked about this last week with courage. We had this idea that either you are a courageous person or you're a coward, rather than seeing that it's actually something you can cultivate and that it is different things for different people. And creativity is the same thing. You know, you are going to have the people who take to a particular art form very quickly and who really excel, but that isn't any more valid than somebody who comes to it and has to really work at it and maybe has periods where they don't do it, but they come back to it. Like everybody gets to define their relationship with creativity, but there are some definite truths you have to accept, which is that it takes work to get to a level where you're happy with what you're producing, that you're probably never going to feel fully satisfied with what you're doing because that's what keeps you wanting to learn and keeps you like, I think there is something to be said for finding joy and contentment with what you can do now, but always learning to be comfortable with the fact that you're always going to be reaching for more. So it's learning how to embrace just being in this constant state of flux where things aren't clearly defined, where it's, you know, it's this process. It's living within the process rather than feeling like, oh, it's this switch that is either flipped or it's not.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, and I think it comes down to feeling comfortable in a space where you don't feel like you're good. Because I'm still very much in that space. There are times where I create a painting and I'm like, I nailed that. But I would say that 80% of the time, I'm in this kind of space of like, my work still isn't very good. Like that. And I think that, well, I'd be curious to talk to other artists who are more advanced in their career. Do they still feel that on a regular basis where there's something kind of lacking or missing? And I think that might actually be a really important key, is just, and to kind of reduce that barrier to entry, is just becoming comfortable sitting in this feeling of not being good. Because realistically, in my experience anyways, that has been consistent. I've never gotten out of that, which, as you pointed out, is the drive behind learning more. And we've talked about that before too. Like, particularly adults, we're not good at sitting in that space because we're adults. You know, like as kids, we were always in that space because it was accepted that we are learning. That was our job as children. And that was our job as young adults too. And then you get into, like, once you're firmly planted in adulthood, now your job is to be the expert on things or to know what you're doing.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, maybe that is kind of a root of my extreme discomfort with modern life too. It's just like, that is, and maybe that's why, that's really interesting. I'm just kind of thinking out loud now here, because my feelings of not being good enough have been increasing over time. And maybe that's because I'm feeling this sort of societal expectation to have things figured out, to know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
To be not an expert, but I guess to have accumulated knowledge, which I have done, but I've also accumulated knowledge of all the things I don't know. And so there's a disconnect between how I'm feeling, which is like, I don't know what I'm doing, versus the expectation that because I'm of a certain age, I should know.
Yeah.
Which is circling back to the beginning of this conversation, because I'm pretty sure you'd said like exactly that. My brain is processing at a slower rate today.
No.
And I can't remember what my initial point was, but
and I think that probably helps to further entrench that notion of faking it till you make it, because there is that pressure to like already have everything figured out. So you're like, well, I guess I got to pretend. And so we all go through our lives pretending that we have it all figured out, when desperately we're all drowning because we don't know what's going on. We know enough to maybe get by, but for a lot of us, there's just this constant feeling like everybody else has it figured out and you don't.
And so
But
there's
it's
this
really the
expectation.
reality. Yeah. But the reality is that many fewer people have it figured out. I'm sure there are some people who like have it locked in, but they'll all have things as well that they're struggling with. Like we all have stuff. And then the issue is, and I'm sure we've addressed this before, just that feeling of isolation, because you always feel like you're the only one. Like I'm the only one struggling with X, or I'm the only one who can't figure out Y. But there are inevitably millions of other people, if not more, who are dealing with the exact same thing, which is why it is so refreshing to have somebody who just says, I'm having a really hard time with this thing. This is something I really struggle with. And then just to be able to go, oh, I'm not the only one. Okay, that is such a huge relief. Because, the number of us who walk around feeling like we're just broken, like I'm never going to figure it out. It's probably a lot of us. But then when you see other people with the same struggles, and then you see those people, once they can release that shame, they can take these steps forward and totally change everything. It makes you feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't give up. Maybe there is something I can do. And it just takes maybe reaching out for help, or, even just acknowledging that something has to change, or whatever it is for anybody, for where they are, just being able to, I think that's the thing, is just have hope.
So I think we have a job to do. I think everyone has a job to do, really, in normalizing not knowing. Because we don't do that enough.
Agreed.
It does feel like there's sort of this culture emerging of like positioning yourself as an expert and a thought leader
and authority,
and, all of that stuff, and that's been very much perpetuated, I think, by the sort of the social networks that have developed over the past however many years. And I would challenge people in those spaces to be honest about what they don't know, and be honest when they feel lost, and to and I would challenge people to like not buy into this kind of culture of expertise. Like it's interesting. We kind of put people up on pedestals and look to them as an authority on things.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues is that so many people, because they're an expert or an authority in one area, they feel like they have to be everywhere, rather than being able to say, here's the one area I have some expertise in. I don't know about this, but people will ask their opinion on something, and then they give this, you see this come up all the time, where somebody will say something inflammatory is because they were trying to like give their opinion on something they don't know anything about, because their expertise is in like a completely different area or something. So I feel like that's where it would really benefit. We'd all really benefit from hearing those people say, that's not my, I don't know that, and not that you can't give an opinion, but to just acknowledge that it's not rooted in anything, or rooted in actual experience.
Well, I also just kind of, there's something about like positioning yourself as an expert on a particular topic, even like there's something unsettling about that for me, because it's like, how can you define yourself as an expert? Like you can be knowledgeable in an area, but like to kind of, I don't know, it's just, well, it's all marketing. It's people market themselves a certain way because they're trying to sell something or position themselves.
So is part of the challenge for you is in people taking ownership of the label expertise when they shouldn't be? Like, who decides who is an expert?
Like, my issue with that is that concept to begin with, I don't like.
Okay.
Because I think we all have something to learn from each other. And so when you're kind of like positioning yourself as an expert, it's kind of like dismissing people. It feels dismissive of other people who might actually have something of value to add to the conversation. But we're creating this like hierarchy within the conversation. I just wish I wish there was a more kind of communal sharing of knowledge that where ego was taken out of the equation. I feel like the ego plays such a huge role in all of this stuff, and it's created a really
that I'll agree with.
Yeah, it's created a really, it destroys any sense of community.
Okay.
Like that's kind of how I feel about it. Like when you have, there's so much potential for us to learn from each other, but we're starting to prioritize those who are self-proclaimed experts in a field because that's what we're trained to do.
Right.
But there's so much more to learn, but now we're kind of narrowing our focus. I don't even know what I'm saying. Right now I just don't like the way things are.
Yeah.
And I think it's just yeah.
Yeah, and I mean I agree with you certainly on the just prevalence of ego involved in conversations and how much that shuts down other opinions for sure and other thoughts and other ideas.
Well, in art too. Like there's ego in art.
Yeah.
That's why we need to project a certain image because our ego is getting in the way. We don't want to admit that we ever paint bad paintings or that we struggle or that any of that, right? And then that all creates like a really limited view, I guess, of
so is artist. It sort of so it's this idea of like this infallible person. So somebody who is an expert, who knows everything, who is flawless, who is perfect, who has it all figured out, who cannot be questioned.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Because I feel like I definitely think I would never want to see experts go away because you obviously need to know who to go to for certain things. Like if I'm going to, take lessons on guitar for a certain thing, I would want to find the person who is the most qualified.
Or medical expertise and stuff like that.
Yes, of course, like that.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's less what I'm not so much talking about that stuff as kind of I'm thinking more along the lines of like those that emerge as experts within like the thought leadership space.
Yeah. I think when you said
I think
when you said self-proclaimed, I think that's really key is anybody who positions themselves as like an expert, and it's like the moment that happens, there's this shield that goes up, and then there's this like close, like my idea is like the one, this is the right way to think about this and all of that. That I definitely take issue with as well. And I think that a lot of this again is stuff that Adam Grant explores in his book Think Again, where he talks about learning how to have that confident humility, where you can come from a place of owning what you know and using what you know, but being able to acknowledge that maybe you don't have the right tools or the right systems, like being open-minded enough to change and challenge the way you do things. So it's like you feel confidence in yourself as somebody who is capable of learning and doing things differently and all of that, but you have that humility, so you're not tied to the things you think or the beliefs you have or the tools or systems you use. You're willing to trade those for something that's better if you find something that is actually better, and it's about keeping that open mind. And yes, I think learning from everybody. And there's this quote, I think it's from Ralph Waldo Emerson, that, is something like, I learn from everybody. I'll put the quote in the show notes because I cannot remember it, but he has a really nice quote about learning from everybody that you meet. There's an opportunity to learn from everybody, which is, if I'm meeting somebody who's maybe earlier in their music journey, for me to feel like there isn't something I could learn from them would just be ridiculous. Like I learn from people with less years of experience than me all the time because their expertise is in maybe a different direction. So that's certainly the case for me as far as something like Ableton, which I'm still relatively new to compared to like my guitar playing. A lot of the people I turn to are the people who are younger than me who came up using Ableton.
Right.
So they just have a different relationship with it, or like production and stuff. So when I was at the age where I was like really practicing guitar, they were going and they were like really getting their production down. So I have a lot I can learn from them, So yeah, it's about never feeling like there isn't something to be gained from learning about somebody else's experience, hearing their ideas and all of that. It doesn't mean you have to just continuously change what you think or change what you do. You always take it and then you process it, and then you pick the thing that makes the most sense or that works for you, or that aligns with your values. This is, again, the benefit of having that rugged flexibility where you know what your values are, and then you're making sure that the things you're doing and thinking and saying, that they align with the core stuff, so that you have something to you, so you're not being swayed constantly as like the tides change, but that you're open-minded and you can take in new information and change your mind and change your opinion and become somebody who's more flexible and just more open. Certainly in my experiences, I've done more and more of that. I've just become a happier person, and I'm, much more compassionate and empathetic. And I feel like I don't have the same barrier I used to have up.
Yeah.
There's definitely no way I would have been able to have these kinds of conversations even just a few years ago, to, reveal this level of struggle that I'm dealing with, and, to acknowledge like all the stuff I still am trying to learn and trying to work through. I was still desperately trying to project that I had it all figured out, that I was like this particular finished version of me that I just wasn't, and I'm not, and I'm never going to be. It's always going to be moving and all of that. It's kind of like water, where when water sits, it gets stagnant. Everybody has that like swimming pool in the backyard that like fills up with water, and you always have to dump it before the mosquitoes like nest there. It's kind of like we're the same way. We have to keep everything flowing and moving. Otherwise, it just gets infested with mosquitoes, Hi, everyone. This is editor Michelle, just chiming in to let you all know that we decided to split this episode into 2 parts. So that way we would still be able to release an episode the week that Robyn is away. So part 2 will be uploaded next week at the usual time, and then we'll be back as usual the following week with a new episode. So I hope you enjoyed the first part of our conversation. If you have questions or comments, feel free to send us an email at streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram. We are at streamofartpodcast. You can follow each of us individually on Instagram as well. The links are going to be in the show notes as always. You can also find the link to our Discord if you feel like joining a community of like-minded creative people. Have a great week, and we will see you in part 2 next week. Bye.